What's going on, Internet? I'm Christopher Peterson from NerdEXP,
And I'm Aliera, his sidekick from Muse's Sled.
and today we're here to help you with your Final Fantasy X IQ. This video will be part nostalgia review for the original release and part preview for the upcoming HD remake this month. So, for the original game, what kind of drew you to play it in the first place?
Well, it was actually a gift from my dad. It was the first game that I ever played on the PlayStation 2. And it was actually my first experience with role-playing games in general. I didn't get to play a lot of video games as a kid. My brothers had an N64 that they hugged pretty closely to themselves. So I played Mario 64 and Wave Race and 1080 and things like that, but I'd never played an RPG. It wasn't really their style of game, so not something that I had. And so my dad gifted me Final Fantasy X, and from the moment I put it in, it was a completely different experience from any game I'd ever played before. I felt, like the story sucked me in. I felt like I was part of what was going on. And before I knew it, during my first playthrough, I'd been on the console 14 hours without realizing it.
Final Fantasy X was the first Final Fantasy game to come out for the PlayStation 2 and to kind of have voice acting, and I think that did a lot of favors, reinvigorated the franchise. Some people kind of say that Final Fantasy X was the last great Final Fantasy game that kind of came out. I think that in part of that was to the characters and just kind of how they all interacted with each other and felt more like a family than just necessarily a roaming party going through. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this game, playing it, was the combat. The last three Final Fantasies, 7, 8, 9, used an active time battle system, and this one kind of flipped it on its head, and you'd see the sidebar movements. And I remember kind of going through each time, making sure that I gave every character a turn so that way they leveled up evenly, or even playing around with different speed factors to see if I could slip in an extra attack move. What kind of things do you feel stuck with you when you went through playing?
What was interesting, like I said, is because it was my first RPG, I wasn't used to the battle system. It was definitely a learning curve for me. But I felt like it was pretty easy to pick up on. I felt like, I had a good understanding of how the battle mechanics worked. I liked that everybody had their own kind of skill and set that you could level up on the sphere grid. And I also really enjoyed the pacing of the game overall. I feel like they did a good job of kind of revealing everybody's backstory, what was going on between Titus and Yuna and Luna and Riku, and so I really enjoyed how they kind of spread that out over the life of the game. You got, as you leveled up and got further, you really got to see how everything was coming together as a whole from the story perspective.
I think the one thing this game really benefited from was the lack of world map. I know this was kind of something that's been in all previous Final Fantasy games. A lot of hardcore fans were kind of upset to see it go. I think it really streamlined the story. There were still side quests and explanations. You had the glyph puzzles and the summoning temples, and there were still multiple ways to solve those and get different secrets, and it's still branching paths. So it still accomplished all of the kind of mechanics that you'd expect from a Final Fantasy game, but you didn't have that needless exploration of going around in circles. One thing, the Albed and the primers, I don't know, going through that game multiple times, I remember trying to collect all 26, and it was kind of funny when you only had half the alphabet and you'd start piecing together words. You'd see a T, funny letter E, and you'd be like, I'm pretty sure that's the. So, and it was something that was kind of amusing that I interacted with when playing through the game.
So I'm going to have a confession here, and I actually wrote down all of the characters to see if I could create the alphabet myself, because it's very frustrating for me not to be able to understand some of the dialogue and some of the clues that you got when you were speaking to the Albed.
Would you pause the game and decode each message?
Yes, when I could, I absolutely would. So it was kind of interesting. It was kind of a puzzle for me. It reminded me of some games that I played on the PC, and just in terms of having its own language. But I felt like that was a really interesting part of the story, that I was so immersed that I couldn't wait to get all of the primers. I wanted to figure it out myself because I needed to know what was going on.
There are a lot of story elements in this game, a lot of side quests you can kind of go through. You don't have to do any of them. The answers in their side quests. I remember spending hours upon hours playing Blitzball to try and get all of Wakka's secret weapons. But then, there's this spot later on where you have to dodge some lightning bolts to get some other secret weapons, and I'm not very good at rhythm, so that wasn't kind of a specialty or anything I went through. The monster captures, super summons, and kind of everything that went through. So was there anything that kind of, you enjoyed from that extra, or did you kind of stay on the straight path and, just rush to completion?
I definitely feel like I wanted to progress the story, so at least with Final Fantasy X, which I found I don't do anymore, I kind of stuck with the main storyline. I will say that I got kind of sidetracked with the chocobo racing, so I felt like that was one thing that I really enjoyed for whatever reason. Chocobos are actually really cute, so I'm going to be, girly in that. But I'd never experienced, again, the Final Fantasy world, so that was my first experience with them, and I just thought they were really neat, and so I really enjoyed that side quest.
A lot of things to enjoy in this game. I think that it's a phenomenal game. If I was to rank it, I'd probably say it might be the best Final Fantasy game that I've ever played. I have a pre-order for the HD remake. I think it's something that's going to really enjoy kind of playing with nostalgia and, kind of collecting trophies on that game. Is there anything you're looking forward to? You're going to give it another go-around, or...?
I absolutely want to play it again. I think it's a great game. It's really the first thing that drew me into JRPGs, which I absolutely love and are definitely my favorite genre of video game. So I think it'll be fun to play through again, fun to kind of fall in love with the storyline and the characters and the gameplay all over. Definitely something that, if you haven't played, I encourage you to check out this time around.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to this video. If you like it, please like it below. Share your comments. Did you enjoy the original Final Fantasy X? Are you planning on picking up the HD remake? You can follow us on Twitter for more comments and theories like this. I'm at ChrisTasticGuy.
And I'm at Aliera.
Level up, friends.